All right. I am Jamie Cope, the Manager of Business Development at the WVU Industrial Extension, and we're glad to have everybody here today. And we are especially glad to have the Henderson Brothers Inc. with us for the true cost behind employee injuries. So just in case you haven't been at one of our webinars before, we like to keep things pretty informal. If you've got questions, probably the best thing to do is to put those in the chat, and we'll deal with those at the end, or we'll have those answered at the end. And we are recording today's webinar, so if you registered, we will be sending you a recording probably by early next week. So really excited to have these guys with us today. A couple of folks on our team have worked with them pretty closely in the past, so we're excited to learn about the true cost behind employee injuries. And I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. So we're really excited to have this opportunity to partner with WVU and share a little bit of our expertise on the true cost behind employee injuries, as well as answer any other kind of related insurance and risk management questions that come up through the presentation. With me today, I have, I'm John Aliveto, and I'm a risk control specialist with Henderson Brothers, and my role is to help clients with their health and safety and regulatory compliance programs to make sure they're meeting their obligations and then finding their own best practices. With me is Eric Gardner, who works right down the hall from me in our claims department. He's our claims supervisor. So Eric is responsible for all of the day-to-day operations of the intake and management of claims that our clients find themselves involved in. And, it's Eric's role to make sure those claims are resolved in a way that people are as happy as possible. And then lastly, we have Rob Hippert, who is in program management. And Rob's actually going to give us a little bit more of an introduction on who Henderson Brothers is and what exactly program management is.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, John. So for anyone that does not know Henderson Brothers or is not familiar with Henderson Brothers, we are a full service insurance agency. We have a commercial insurance department that John, Eric, and I are part of. We also have a health and benefits department, a retirement division, and a personal lines division. So we kind of manage all aspects of our clients' programs in those divisions, as well as the business owners when you talk about personal wealth management and personal lines. We're located in Pittsburgh. We have an office right next to the convention center. We have about 170 employees to date, and we've been around since 1893. So we've been in the business for quite some time. And as I mentioned, John, Eric, and I, we specialize in the commercial insurance division and assisting our clients with managing their programs and their risk from that aspect. And today, we want to jump into what's the true cost of employee injury to an organization? A little bit, what's the difference between your risk and your insurance buy? And then how do we manage those factors through our claims management process, through our loss prevention process? And then how does that impact your cost? How does it impact your bottom line? How does it allow you to operate as a profitable business and competitive business? Because those are the factors I know that are important to you as business owners or health and safety professionals to assist your businesses and operating effectively. So you want to jump to the next slide, John? So there's really 4 aspects to an employee injury, and really this translates to all different types of claims. So obviously when we're talking about employee injuries, we're looking at the workers' compensation space, but this conversation could be relevant to general liability claims, cyber liability claims, employment claims, contractual issues between you and your vendors, you and your clients. So every business has an aspect of retaining risk. Retained risk are the ones that a business faces every day and cannot be transferred either contractually to a third party or transferred contractually to an insurance company. So that's where the risk transfer mechanisms comes in, but not all risk are transferable. So whether you're talking about an employee injury or some other aspect of your business, there are factors that the business will retain and cannot transfer that to a third party. So obviously you can buy workers' compensation insurance, you can manage your claims, you can try to prevent injuries, but there's always going to be an impact to the business when one of those, what we would call claims or events happens to one of your employees. So it's very important to be mindful that even though you buy insurance, even though you have legal departments and transfer your risk through contracts, that there is still risk to the business. And what are those factors? How do you quantify those risks and cost to the organization? And then how can you structure your risk management programs to mitigate that and allow you to operate a profitable business? So when you look at an employee injury, there's really a few different elements to it. One, I'm sure all of you have employees that have been with you a long time, have a certain amount of expertise, knowledge, they know what they're doing. And when one of those employees becomes injured, an event happens. So that's when Eric and I would work together and discuss what does that look like for the business. When you look at the workers' compensation aspect of it, in all 50 states, there's some sort of statutory requirement for you to provide workers' compensation benefits to your employees. And that would mean making them whole for any medical incident or any medical bills that they have with regards to the incident. And unfortunately, if it's a significant enough incident, also indemnifying them for any lost wages that they have. So there's obviously a financial impact to the organization up front for purchasing that workers' compensation policy. And certainly on the back end, once you experience those claims, there's increased cost factors that are part of your insurance program. But we want to look at what are the other factors that may impact the organization that may be outside of that insurance program and why it's important to try to prevent those injuries before they occur. Obviously, right now, at the top of most people's mind is the labor market and getting employees into work, back to work. It's very competitive right now. Wages and salaries are going up. So if you have one of your key employees that's involved in a workers' compensation incident, not only are we looking at increased insurance costs, we're looking at increased cost to the organization, to lost productivity. What was that employee's job function? Can you replace them? Do you need to pay overtime to your other employees that may need to pick up the responsibilities of the employee that was injured? And obviously, if it was a significant enough injury and you needed to replace that employee, the labor market is not something that is very favorable right now. So what would it cost to bring in another employee? Can you find skilled labor in the current marketplace? Those are a lot of the factors that we talk about with our clients and why it's important for John and his team to be on the front end of it to manage the risk that your clients face or you face as business owners, to try to mitigate the claims before they happen and make those costs to the organization as small as possible. And then you want to go to the next slide. And then just more globally, how does that look for non-employee injuries? Obviously, everyone or most people on this call are probably in the manufacturing space. So you have vendors, clients who you're manufacturing products for, businesses that you're getting materials from. The best element of risk prevention and risk transfer probably on the front end is contractual risk transfer. Are you looking at your contracts before you sign them? Do you understand what your insurance program covers and what may not be included in your insurance program that's part of that contract that you're signing with those clients and vendors? Do you have the ability to change the terms and conditions of that contract up front to try to mitigate any uninsurable risk that may be part of that contract or part of your operations? Those are the things that are very important to look at. And this is just the four elements of mitigating that risk. You can strategically renegotiate those contracts. Operationally, if you had an employee injury, do you have other employees in your company that could pick up the operations of that employee that was injured? Are you a single manufacturing location? Do you have multiple manufacturing locations if you were to have a property loss? And how quickly could you get back up and running? John and his team identify the hazards at each individual business to try to find out, how can we mitigate the potential for losses as much as possible? And then the financial element, when you look at your contracts, when you look at your production, when you look at your employees, if we lost a key employee, what's the financial impact to the organization going to be if we do have an event that occurs? If we lost a key contract, what's the financial impact of that key contract, and how could we replace that? Those are really the elements that we look at, and we want to communicate with our clients of how do you structure an insurance program to transfer as much risk to the insurance companies as possible? And then do you understand the uninsurable risk that your business faces and the elements of claims management and risk control that can help you mitigate the financial impact to the business should we have one of those events occur?
So, gotcha. So, having one of those events occur, right? We have, as Rob mentioned, some claims that are transferable to insurance programs, and we have claims that covered claims and non-covered claims, as the slide shows right now. And when we're talking about workers' compensation, there are certainly, as Rob mentioned, in every state statutory guidelines for what is going to be covered or at least paid for once a claim does take effect. And there are definitions, and states are different as to what constitutes a claim. For instance, in one state, just being at work basically can be considered a work-related injury, regardless the activity that you were performing, while other states have very narrow definitions of what is the work that you're doing and in whether or not that would be considered a claim. Can you guys, hey, Jamie, can you hear us still? Jamie?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. We
Okay.
lost your slides though, but
Okay, we'll have to pull it back up.
okay.
You can hear me all right. So,
Yeah.
you know what? We all went down. Did you go down? Can you turn yours my way so I can see the screen? Because my screen went down.
So we seem to have had a
So sorry,
a fairly
everyone.
catastrophic
Event,
on our network,
which we don't know is insurable or not. I don't think it is, but can we hit the next? So, for me at least. So while John brings that back up, I'll finish up on the slide that you had previously seen, which was the covered and uncovered situation. There are, because of the examples I was mentioning, you sometimes will have what is considered an uncovered comp claim. There may be other reasons why it's uncovered, which I'll talk about briefly, but they may, it just may be a situation where they didn't follow all the rules, or there are time frames in reporting comp claims, as we all know. And as small business owners and working in small business, as you folks are right now, or in all of your businesses, you know that the work comp system can be very frustrating when it comes to what certain judges sometimes will constitute compensable, as we say. So now we're talking, after we know that there are uncovered and covered claims. What's the process, right? The claim process is pretty straightforward, but within that process, there are different ways to manage the program so that you have a more effective program with an end result that is more favorable to you and can reduce your cost, or at least keep your costs down. And the first thing is reporting the claim itself, right? Every insurance carrier wants you to report the claim as soon as possible. Every statistic out there, every study out there shows that the sooner a claim gets reported, the better chance you have of having a more beneficial resolution to the claim. That's not foolproof, but it does show that sooner is better in regard to reporting the claims. So when you report a claim, what's your investigative process? John may touch on some of this in a moment, but you don't just fill out the form and send it in. that's really not the best way to report a claim. The best way is to find out everything you can. If there were witnesses, find out from the employee what they were doing. The more information we can provide to an insurance carrier, the better chance we have of getting the proper coverage and answers for that particular claim. So we do have, so now we're, as we're starting to handle this claim going forward, we've now reported it and we're starting to handle the claim. Well, that includes, as all of you know, just treatment of the individual if they're out of work, making sure that they've reached whatever particular, I feel like I have PTSD and I hear a ding and I think the thing is going to go away again. Whether or not they are going to be compensated for their lost time, if there is lost time associated with the claim. And that brings us to being able to bring someone back. Again, all the numbers show that a lost time claim costs sometimes, in some cases, double literally what just a medical only claim costs over the same period of time. So we really want to try to have a return to work situation, bringing people back, having them jump back into the process of working. No matter what we can do, we want to try to bring them back, even if it's a sedentary situation, because there's a multiplier effect, as we all know, when it comes to claims and the paying of claims and the ultimate cost to you. As Rob mentioned, your insurance program has other types of costs associated with it, and one of them is a factor that is calculated in every state. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to bring people back to work. And one of the really important things, and one of the really important factors in that, is how we are responding and dealing with our insurance carrier. We know that sometimes we, as employers, feel like there's sometimes an adversarial relationship with an insurance carrier. That's the best approach we should have and look at with our insurance carriers as a partner. Okay, they don't want to pay any more on a claim than you want to pay on that claim. So if we have great relationships with our insurance carriers, with our adjusters, with our nurse case managers, they know who we are, they know what we're capable of doing, and we also can voice our concerns to them if we've got good relationships with them. So it's a very important factor in all of this. It's, I think, overlooked a lot of times, because we just, they went to the doctor and they gave me their medical and that's all I need. Well, and the adjuster's handling it. Okay, that's fine, and that is their job, but the better communication between the two of you will hopefully make for a better resolution in the claim. And the resolution, we purposefully use the word resolution because we don't know how that's going to eventually end up, right? A claim can go into litigation and then settle with a negotiated settlement. It could settle through a judgment in a court situation. It could just ultimately, the person gets better. And honestly, we put a big spotlight on those really bad claims that we get, and they sour us a lot of times on what's going on in the work comp system. But an overwhelming majority of workers' compensation claims are resolved amicably, and they just have the individual gets the treatment they need. They get, if they're out of work, everybody tries to bring them back as best they can, and then we move on from there to resolve it, pay the bills essentially, and then resolve the claim. So that's our model. That's what we'd like to have happen every time. We understand that costs are associated with those really difficult claims, and we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make that those claims are being managed by all parties involved, the partnership that we talked about.
So, that's kind of how you structure a program and how you might manage a claim if you have one. And then the other piece of this whole issue around having employee injuries and mitigating the cost of those injuries is to just avoid talking to Eric altogether by not having claims, which is hard, right? And there's basically two ways you can go about avoiding Eric. We can do nothing and just go with chance, go with luck, go with a history of past performance of not having claims. And that's certainly something that we see organizations do. And at some point that luck changes. And when it changes, and I'm sure Eric would agree, those claims are larger than necessary. So to avoid that, we want to do something. And that something is really broad. So when we think about risk control, we always get really focused on the tunnel vision aspects of just employee health and safety. What are the OSHA rules? What do I have to do? Oh, well, they have PPE, right? And that's kind of like, that's our gateway, right? So when we start to think about what is that something and where do we do our interventions, we want to think about the bigger picture. If I have that employee injury, that's not just an employee that maybe we needed to put some PPE on, or maybe we weren't complying with an OSHA regulation all the way, but we have those additional consequences that Rob was talking about the downtime. You have that claims management piece that's going to occupy a lot of your time as a supervisor and a manager and an owner, dealing with claims, talking to insurance carriers, talking to potentially attorneys. The other thing that we forget about is sometimes our employees, in the process of being injured at work, also cause or are part of the damage that has occurred at our facilities. So maybe we've, on top of an employee injury, had damage to equipment or damage to other assets or buildings. So we have to do something, and we have to pick that level that we want to get involved with our risk control program. Sometimes it's simple. We just want to go in and fix what's broken so that it can't break and cause incidents. Other times we need to make larger, more concrete plans. We need to start moving into those more sophisticated programs where we're developing comprehensive risk control practices and we're designating accountability for those practices. Other cases, we're kind of coming in a little bit late and we have to investigate what's gone wrong so we can take some lessons learned away from it and just not have it reoccur. That's one of the big things that is oftentimes one of the positives that we can take away from having a claim is it's an opportunity to learn, right? Instead of letting it sour us on workers' comp or employees or health and safety in the workplace, let's learn a lesson from that incident. Let's talk to our representation, whether that's Eric or Rob or myself, and say, what do we do to make this better in the future? Then the other thing we have to do is we have to actively supervise our risk control programs. There's nothing worse than a really well-written safety program that sits on the shelf. There's nothing worse than an insurance policy that we sign off on and we accept and we read the deck page and then we put it on the shelf and we have no idea when or how to use it. We have to get actively involved in our programs in order to even enter into that prevention and intervention world. So what we like to try to motivate our clients and associates into is what we would call active interventions. And those active interventions are basically that supervising and that learning from our mistakes process that we just kind of talked about. And what we want to do is recognize the risks to our operations that exist. And then we classify those risks. So is it a risk to people? Is it a risk to process? Is it a risk to long-term contracts? Because as some of us on the call might know, if we have poor safety performance that we have to report to a third party for contract vetting, we might not get through that gateway, right? So we want to recognize those risks that are seen and unseen as they relate to whatever it is we're trying to accomplish as a business. At the end of the day, these active intervention programs are going to allow us to be more competitive in our chosen business. When we think about recognizing risks, what are the risks to our employees from compliance issues? We want to make sure that we are checking the box on our compliance concerns, recognizing where those liabilities exist, and then creating a program to account for those liabilities. We want to look at our programs that, while an employee might not get hurt, we could have an employee, through lack of whatever training, understanding, skill, or ability, that causes risk to other parts of our organization. So as we recognize the risk, we then move into kind of the feasibility and planning stage of addressing those risks. We have our risk register. All right, these are the things that are probably likely to happen, or maybe they're unlikely to happen, but if they do happen, there's an extraordinarily negative consequence to those incidents happening. We start to figure out what's our feasibility plan for meeting a certain compliance goal, right? Okay, we have this compliance obligation to update this particular safety program. What are the resources it's going to take? What's our timeline to do that? It's unrealistic to think that we can flip a switch and be automatically compliant if we're not compliant. It's unrealistic for us to think that if we have a contract obligation, we'll just say, oh, we signed off on the contract, so obviously we're fulfilling it. We have to create a plan to make those feasibility assessments. So when we have a regulation, we want to read it. We want to understand it. We want to talk to those experts. And that's a lot of what we do in our department, is digesting what might be complex and then applying it to your actual business obligations and your actual workplace. You make that plan, and then you roll right into training and implementation program. I know training is a difficult process, especially when we don't have a lot of employees, or when we have a lot of employees wearing a lot of different hats. We get hung up on training thinking that it has to be a session that's even more formal than what we're doing today, and that we have to do a lot of preparation and a lot of, research. When we talk about training is just conversations in which the person that has information and knowledge imparts that to another party that needs that information and knowledge. And then we just verify that that newly educated party understands the program, what to do, and what to do when they don't understand or when the program doesn't work. That's all training is. Training can be a conversation. Training can be a handout that people read. The important part, though, to make it training is to write it down and sign off on it. Document that you do this training so that we don't have the excuse when it comes to incidents where maybe it's as simple as a claim that has a little bit of medical on it, or it's a very large claim, that we have some documentation in our records showing that, hey, we accounted for this issue and we tried to do our best to mitigate it, right? It might not have prevented the incident, but when Rob is working on the program renewal for the next year, it helps him to paint a better picture of, hey, we had some claims, but here's what we did to mitigate those claims on the front end. Here's the lessons learned on the back end that we're hoping this doesn't reoccur. When we do our training and we're ready to roll out our program, then it's the implementation stage. And implementation's hard, right? We have this really good register of risks that we've addressed. We've done our feasibility planning. We know the process. We told everybody the process. Everybody seems like they understand the process. And then we go to do it and it doesn't work, or it doesn't work all the way. Implementation's a cycle. You all know that. That's what you're faced with every day. We have to ride those ups and downs of the implementation process and learn from them. Okay, our plan didn't work, or the PPE we selected to protect against this particular incident wasn't the right piece. How do we make it work? It's a continuous cycle. You're going to review that cycle. You're going to take the lessons learned from what worked and those lessons learned from what didn't work and just reapply it to that register, redo your plan, and come out stronger. When you take this active intervention process and you really own it and you create accountability for it within all levels of your organization, whether you're the owner who has to initiate that plan, you're the person who's been designated to move that plan ahead, or you're the employee who just needs to work within that program, when you do that and you own it and you have accountability for your program, you have a very clear performance advantage. On the end of just being able to secure insurance in a firm market, Rob can tell you that when we can demonstrate that a company has an active and well thought out and working plan, not a plan with 0 incidents, but a plan that works most of the time, it's a really good situation. On the flip side, if you can compete against folks that haven't worked through this planning process and aren't making that investment, you can demonstrate that you're the better vendor for whoever your client is. You're that vendor of choice. You're that top choice when it comes to somebody selecting their next contractor. That's what we want to get to. It's all related. It all ties back to the bottom line of your business operating, and controlling those employee incidents can control a lot of other costs down the line. Study after study has shown that operations with good safety records and good safety programs also have great quality programs and great product performance. And both those things lead directly to typically superior sales and superior competitive advantage over other operations within the same market. So that's what we want you guys to take away from this. And that's where we want to really focus our efforts in avoiding Eric, making sure that our program renewals are really easy and straightforward, regardless of the market conditions, and really have a positive outcome for all of our employees.
So just kind of bringing this full circle, how do we put together these 3 pieces of the puzzle to help you mitigate your cost when it comes to employee injuries or any types of risk that your business faces? Obviously, John just talked a lot about policies and procedures, implementation and training. But the first step is really to define the risk, to understand, what type of risk you're taking on as an organization. How can you structure an insurance program to transfer as much risk as possible? What does the cost of claims do to your organization in the future? Eric talked a little bit about experience modification, how that impacts your program. So really it's, on the program management side, it's working with John and his team to identify what types of risk, what types of goods are you making? What types of clients are you working with? Do you understand your risk, both from an employee injury standpoint and how that's going to impact your business, and from the more general standpoint of what type of risk are we taking on? And then how do we develop policies, procedures, structure insurance programs, communicate with carriers about all the things you're doing to reduce cost? And then work with Eric and his team, when those events do happen, you're bound to have claims, knock on wood. If you haven't, that's great. But as John said, it's something that is almost inevitably going to happen. And how do you reduce the cost of those claims through correct management? And that's really the process to mitigate as much risk as possible when you're talking about employee injuries. And really it starts with an understanding of what those risks are and how you can address them.
Yeah, and I know this slide says enterprise risk management, and maybe we're thinking in the group like, well, that really applies to gigantic organizations. Enterprise risk management applies to any organization, even if it's a 1 or 2 person operation, right? We still have to do all of these processes. We just have to work with the scale, right? And scale's really where I think a lot of people get frightened in the insurance kind of and risk management realm is, oh, well, this is too big, it's too much. You have to find a group that you can work with that understands your operations and can help scale programs to fit your operations. That's one of the things that we do a lot of, is making sure that when we're rolling out a program, we have a plan so that it can work with somebody that's maybe 10 people, right? They got a couple vehicles, they have a small facility where they're working at, but they still have the ability to meet all of those other obligations that exist for every company, regardless of size. Eric, any other thoughts on enterprise risk management, or claims management,
Well,
as it applies to our group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we're talking about trying to manage the program, if John's he keeps throwing it at me, so if John's failed, okay, and we now have claims, then what we try to do is putting this program into place, what we call program, but really best practices when it comes to managing claims. It doesn't matter the size of the organization, and really it might not even matter that we're talking about, right, workers' compensation, because there are certainly risk control programs and claim management programs that go across the board. So I would just suggest that you keep that in mind as well, that think outside of potentially a work injury and apply this to other lines of businesses that you have insurance currently on.
And so with that, we'll open it up to questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks. That was great stuff, guys. Thank you so much for that. And we did get a couple of questions, but if anybody has more questions, please just go ahead and post those in the chat. And I think this is dealing with one of the things that we have heard about is kind of a culture of filing claims. So the question was, what do I do about a claim that I don't think is a claim?
Right, and we get that a lot. I field many phone calls from clients who aren't sure if they have a claim, or here's a situation. This is an odd one, and I'll admit that I hear some new ones every so often. So the possibilities are endless, and really a real general philosophy is to go ahead and make that phone call first of all. If you aren't sure, you need to talk to and reach out to an expert in the field of claim management, if at all possible, and then talk it through. And then it becomes a decision: is this something that we should just keep on record? Should we let the carrier know? When it comes to workers' compensation, however, I will suggest that you should typically err on the side of reporting everything. Just report everything, because frequency is not an issue when it comes to any kind of evaluation of a premium. It's clearly the dollars associated with those claims, and a carrier will make that determination whether it's compensable.
Great, thanks. And here's another one, and this is very general, but just how do I start? How do I start a program, a training program? What's the best way to get moving if somebody wants to start putting something in place?
I mean, the first step is just doing that, recognizing that you need one. And so there's a lot of resources available to kind of make that start. And it really starts with an honest assessment of what you have at your operations and what you think you need at your operations. Once you start to line up where you think you need improvement, or where you think that you could really learn something or you need something, then you reach out. You can reach out to us, or you can reach out to another expert in that subject matter and start to develop that plan. You can use a lot of resources direct from, if it's a safety regulation issue, OSHA has resources available, right? WVU has resources available. Look for your resources and start to build that understanding. And then as you learn more, ask more and more in-depth questions. That's how you get your start. Once you're ready to formalize that, set up the accountability structure in your organization and make it a priority within your organization to start that process. And then you work through meeting small goals within that process until you have a process that's self-sustaining. It's doable, it's hard. We spend a lot of our time setting that up. And there's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Usually we just get involved, we do our research with our clients and figure out where their risks are and what the next steps are, and we just continually move forward. And we never take a let's do it all at once approach, because it's just, you got to do it in small chunks.
Right. Great. Yeah. And if you guys will humor me for just a minute, we had a recent situation with a client, and maybe we shouldn't mention their name, but they were having some insurance claim issues, and Greg Green with our group, who does health and safety, was working on that one. Greg, you want to talk a little bit about what went on with them, and maybe the Henderson brother guys could comment on what they would do and how they could help. So yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Sure. Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yeah, I got you good, Greg.
Okay, good. Yeah, we had a client that was having a rash of injuries, and we had them send us their accident reports. And we come to find out that they really weren't investigating their accidents to find the root cause. And so what we're doing is implementing a plan to get in there and find that root cause of why these accidents are occurring and try to prevent them, from happening in the future. So it was kind of we're working with them now, hand in hand, to try to get them to teach them how to investigate an accident, and then also how to prevent it from occurring in the future.
Yeah. So is that something that you guys see a lot of with people who say, yeah, this accident happened, but they don't report how or why it happened, or do anything to try to stop that?
Yes. Short answer is we get a lot of that. And you have to step back, and I think you guys are, the analysis that you are going through right now, you can't overlook or leave any stone unturned, because you just don't know for sure where the arrows coming at that rash of accidents. You just don't always know for sure. And yes, we know it's somewhere in the pipeline there, but as you look closer, and as we found that as we put programs into place for our clients and they continue to really get traction, it changes the culture, at the organization. And that probably is the number one thing, whether, top down, if we have to convince upper management, that's one thing, but let's get some traction on this program so that the culture changes. And that's, sometimes half the battle.
And Greg, we've talked a lot about internally and with our clients what the difference is between reporting a claim and performing accident investigation, and how those have different elements of root cause analysis, collecting the correct information. And we've run into similar scenarios where sometimes clients think, just filing a workers' compensation claim was an accident investigation, and that's all the information we need. John and his unit have a completely different setup for the types of information they like to look at than Eric and his group, which is mostly statutorily required information by the states, and finding a way to combine those, usually on the supervisor level, to develop a root cause analysis so that upfront you are collecting as much information as possible, and not just the amount of information that requires a claim.
Yep.
Yeah. We definitely found that, that was a big thing with this company. And, that's what we're working with them to help prevent that from happening in the future and kind of teach them how to properly investigate that accident.
Yeah, I mean, what we experience a lot is we get the what and the how of the accident.
Right.
90% of the time, we don't miss that what and the how.
Right.
We rarely get the why. And so that why the accident happened is the really important piece for our end to be able to do that root cause analysis. And I think one of the reasons we lose that why is people are afraid to have an incident investigation conversation. It's it feels like a negative conversation. And I think a lot of times just because who we are as a society, have that connotation that, oh, I had an accident, I have to report it, this is going to be bad, this is going to have negative consequences for me. If we as an organization can break that habit and remove, the unreasonable consequence from reporting an accident, you'll find that you get much better accident reports. You'll have much fewer accidents in the future because you'll get that why. You can probably easily correct the why most of the times. I mean, we've seen claims where, we ask a simple question of, oh, well, why was that broken?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, oh, well, we didn't want to tell maintenance that it was broken because somebody was going to get blamed for that piece being broken. And then that piece causes an accident. It's like, well, let's not have that thought process. Let's just get it fixed. It's broken. Blaming somebody for breaking it's not going to make it not broken. So open dialogue improves that process tremendously.
I totally agree. It's almost, there has to be an amnesty, whereas you can't be
Right.
afraid to report and
Yep.
and I guess not to get defensive, because you find that a lot when you go to investigate an accident, that people become defensive, and maybe because it's fear of, getting in trouble or getting disciplined. But yeah, that's a stigma that we really have to work on to try to, to really get to the bottom of it.
Yep.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but happy to have anybody chime in if you've got, I guess, speak now or forever hold your peace, I guess is what we could say here. I'm not seeing anything coming. So I really want to thank you guys. This has been fantastic. A lot of great information. I will, as I said earlier, I'll send out a recording probably early next week of this to everybody who registered. We'll be sure and put your contact information in there as well. Other than that, just everybody stay safe out there, right? So we can
Right.
not have, we don't want to deal with Eric, right? Isn't it Eric that got?
No, it's Eric. You don't want to talk to me. I don't take it personally. Don't worry.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Take care.